Good morning and good afternoon. With a funding institution, which is a product I manage, academic institutions gain insights analyzing awardee granted data, finding internal and external opportunities across a large pool of active, recurring, and accurate funding opportunities, save time, filtering for limited submissions and the eligibility criteria, and stay up to date tracking relevant opportunities. Since the beginning of the year, funding institutional data can be integrated into Pure. And with this integration, funding institutional helps research development professionals and researchers to save time and effort, and through Pure optimize their grant success rates, track applications, and showcase their successes. Today, Jeremy will share the experience of Queensland University of Technology, of Pure and funding institutional. Over to you, Jeremy.
So to give a little bit of background on where I come from, so I'm part of a program of work at QUT where we're currently replacing our research management systems that have existed for about 20 years. They're heavily integrated, we have a whole bunch of different systems feeding off it, and it's quite complicated and messy. So it's a large-scale undertaking that's been going on for a number of years. We're partway through that. We've gone live with one part of our program, and we have another couple that will be going live later this year and early next year. So as part of this work, we've developed something that I gave a talk about in another session about the research management reference model. I just wanted to highlight here because I'll be drawing on it part of explaining our solution. But what this really was an effort to go and break down the activities of research management in a way such that we could be able to have an organizational hierarchy agnostic terminology that we could use that would allow us to drive the conversations that we're doing. We've now made this available to other universities and resources are available online at that link there if that is of interest to you. It's got a much greater amount of detail underneath it that you can see in here. So each of that high level piece would be broken up, talking about the life cycle of a project, the various stages that it goes through. In each of those 10 domains, you have a number of areas of activity you can see listed here. And underneath those is a number of different processes. So there's an awful lot of detail going on in here that we've gone through a process of validation with people that you can take and apply to your own universities or institutions as you wish. So just you can see here's a high level overview of everything. I've already touched on these points about how we've been applying it, but some universities are now starting to pick it up as a maturity, using it to begin to assess their maturity in the field of research management, where we have systems that work, what we need to add in there. And so the reason I wanted to touch on all of this is that, as I said, we have a very complex ecosystem at the moment, a whole bunch of systems integrated together with a lot of custom workarounds that we've built. And so being able to replace that has proven quite challenging. So we've gone for a selection of systems, and so I want to talk through what that looks like. Funding institutional is sort of the gateway into the system suite that we have, which will be starting out in the project conception phase for identifying funding opportunities. And I'll talk through more what that looks like later on. From that, these will be synced across into Pure using the new integration that's been released, where work on the applications can be conducted and then sent through for internal review. In turn, we have a contract management system where from the application, data will be pulled so that work can go in there to be able to look at the various contract terms to get sign off on that as it gets processed through. We then, once the application is awarded, we then have the actual management phase that goes on within Pure, where we'll have the milestones and other pieces to make sure that all the deliverables are met. We also have another system, Infonetica ERM, which we'll be using to manage our ethical reviews. And so that information will be integrated into Pure via another integration that is coming shortly. From that, research outputs will be entered in, and this is the part we've already gone live with at Pure earlier this year and linked up with awards as appropriate. We have student management will be done in a separate system, but we will have information coming into Pure from that, as well as ethical review information being stored in there. And then all of this information will be collated together into Pure, where we'll be using the portal and the reporting tools to be able to provide a holistic review of the research activity at the university. So going through this, So funding institutional into pure is something that we've been driving and having a number of conversations around how we can do this at the university. So I want to talk through about how we can do this to leverage the work of funding identification through into that life cycle. So what I've got here is an example of one of the standard funding opportunities within Australia, a DECRA, from the Australian Research Council. And you can see on the side there that we have some custom notes that have been applied, both at the institutional level, at the funder level, and for this particular grant opportunity for the DECRA itself, and a collection of information. There's also a Send to Pure button up the top, which allows us to send this funding institutional opportunity directly into Pure as a funding opportunity. Also, we can do a search or have various lists that we have in there and do a multi-select to be able to send into Pure, so that if there's a cohort of opportunities that we've found that we want to bring across, for example, if we've identified a new funder and want to advertise their opportunities, or if there's a specific stream that we want to find, we can do that and bring it across. And when we choose to send to Pure, we'll be presented with a screen such as this, where we can apply a number of custom labels to it, and these will be brought across into Pure as labels against the content for us. So you can see in here that this same DECRA record has been imported into Pure, and that this information is then available under the funding opportunities module. This allows it to be searched for it to be shared with academics and other people. I've got some screenshots of these things that I'll go through as well. So you can see in here that you can do keyword searches. Unfortunately, the label searches isn't a direct search option in Pure at the moment. So I think that's something that I would hope is on the roadmap to come at some point and would be a good feature to go along with this. But you can do keyword searches and bring back the labels. So the labels can add value in that sense. You can also see in here the sort of information that's come across. One thing that I will pull out about this DECRA was that when I initially found it, it had the total amount listed in Argentinian pesos rather than Australian dollars, and which was obviously incorrect. I raised that to Funding Institutional via a form they have on the site, and that was corrected within a week. So there is good responsiveness from the Funding Institutional team to correct this information and make sure that you have good data that you're working with. In turn, you can share these records. So you can see here that we've got the funding opportunity can be shared with users or with an organizational unit if you're an administrator. So we can choose particular faculties or schools that we want to share it with. Another limitation I have noticed in this, just for individual organizational unit within that faculty, you can't just share with the faculty itself. This is fairly new functionality within Pure, so I'm confident that these things will be addressed in time, but just to give you the feedback of what I've noticed so far in us using it. And so if you share it with the faculty, that will then come up with an organizational unit. People can then search for it and find it within Pure, listed as shared with my unit. You can also share with users, which will send them a direct notification within the system. A little pop-up on the side there to say that so-and-so has shared this with you. And this one can be done by academics. It doesn't just need to be administrative staff. So for this purpose, it allows academics to actually see the funding opportunities within Pure and foster collaboration before they might actually go to developing the application itself. And so when they log in there, they'll get a quick overview. They'll be able to see ones that they've imported from Funding Institutional, will say imported by me, but they can also see ones that have been shared with them, so that they can quickly access those from the very first page when they come into the award management module. All right, the next stage, once you've identified the funding, is of course applying for it. And this is new functionality as well within Pure that is a very welcome addition. But you can see on the side here, so this is the view that an academic would see of a funding opportunity. Previously, funding opportunities weren't visible to academics, but that's now been reworked as part of this integration so that they can be made available to your research community. And as part of that, they've now included a create an application button. So you can see on the side, they come and get some of the information out of it, and then they can choose to create an application right away. That will then give them a prompt, which will ask about various fields that can be populated and the type of application they want to create. But once they click through that, an application is created with all of that pre-filled. At the moment, there's a default title that comes across, which is the funding opportunity itself. It has the investigator themselves who's created it. The funding is set to the max amount awarded for the ceiling of the award that they're applying for. And so effectively, they can actually just click save at this point if they want to. This is particularly useful in the sort of case of doing sort of EOI type applications where you might have people putting up their hand to say they're interested in a round. You could manage that within the system. They can have an application that's set up and then gives them the bones that can be filled out more before it actually gets submitted through an approval process and actually to the funding body. And yeah, so there's a few more of the details coming in that have been pre-populated across. And you can see there, as I mentioned, that it sets it to the maximum funding. In this example, it was coming up as Argentinian pesos. It has since been corrected, but I haven't updated the slides yet, so my apologies for that. So that's an overview of the functionality that we have and how we plan to use it. A couple of key points that I do want to bring up is that at the moment, I've mentioned some of these anyway, there's a few limitations of the integration. It's fairly new. I think there's a lot of good promise in there, and I think it's something that we can leverage as is right now, but there are places where it could be made better. The major one for me is that at the moment, when you bring over a funding opportunity, it includes a link back to Funding Institutional, but that link isn't clickable. It needs to be copy and pasted into your browser, into a separate browser window to actually go to the Funding Institutional page. I think if we had that, then that would be much easier to go, look, you can see the brief information in Pure and you can go to Funding Institutional to see the notes and other pieces and look at the other features that are within Funding Institutional that are available to you and would give a more seamless experience. Not all fields are synced across at the moment, as the notes that you generate aren't coming across into Pure. That probably makes sense at the moment. There's not a great place for them to go within Pure, but it is something to note that you sort of only some of the fields that you have within Funding Institutional will come across, and so just to be aware of that. There is also, once fields get synced over, for those of you who've done much in Pure with sync jobs will be well aware that fields get locked and you can't edit them. And so this can have the limitation that you aren't actually able to change these fields after the fact to be able to, in the case where we had Argentinian pesos coming in, that wasn't actually something that we could correct within Pure. So we needed to get it corrected on Funding Institutional, but as I said, very responsive, did that quickly. And I think that is better than cleaning up data in your own system. Being able to make sure that the source system has good quality data benefits everyone. So I think collectively there's a lot of benefit for us to do that. As I mentioned, you can't filter by the labels. And I should also stress that this is all hypothetical for us yet. We're in the midst of UAT right now. We haven't gone live with Funding Institutional or awards management in Pure. So our experience is, I can't give you direct feedback on how it's been received or the sort of take up of it. This is what we've worked through so far as our solution for how we'll be leveraging this. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy and Eleonora, for your presentation. So there has come a few questions through, but first I just wanted to say also that it's great to see that structured approach that you're using at QUT. I remember also when you visited us in Aalborg, Jeremy, that it was in the works then. I wondered whether you have you started to collaborate with other institutions on that model yet?
Yes, yeah, we've actually gone through this past year. We've done a number of interviews because the model itself was initially developed in a QUT context. And we thought it was applicable more broadly, but so we've been doing a whole series of interviews with a number of experts from Australia and abroad. We've actually got a paper on the development of that, and that'll be submitted to a journal shortly, but we've also incorporated a number of revisions to the model as part of that. So as I said, there was a talk on Monday I did around that.
Yeah.
No, Tuesday, sorry. When these are made available afterwards, people can go back and view that if they wish and reach out to me if they have any feedback on it.
Great. Another small question is, so, and you mentioned that your systems are, and also the systems you had before Pure, were heavily integrated. So do you, and of course, that's how it is, right, at the university when you have all these systems, but do you use sort of like a central integration platform?
That's actually a fairly recent thing at QUT. Well, I should say we have had various attempts to centralize how integration is done and to develop standard methodology around that. But there's been a major project to make sure that we have a common platform that integrations are built in. So we're now doing that so that all of our integrations are built in this tool, Del Boomi, which is used to connect all of our systems together and to be able to have common data stores that get shared between them. We've also got work going on by our enterprise architecture team that's looking at trying to define a sort of gold standard of information that comes from each system, so that each system and each data entity will have its own defined interface. And so every system that needs to get that information is using the same interface. And so if we do need to change systems, you can swap the system out and just make sure that it's matching that same common interface, and then every downstream system should be able to consume the information the same way. All great, you know, various stages of implementation of that, but it is something that QUT is working heavily towards. Great,
thanks for that. And there's come a few questions here that are a bit of the interrelated. So one says whether the researchers well, you said you're in user acceptance test, but do you expect the researchers to engage with funding institutions directly? And then on a similar question is, do you think researchers will use Pure or funding institutional?
Okay, so researchers will definitely use Pure. That's how they will need to submit their applications. It will be part of, you know, the standard procedures they need to go through. Funding institutional, initially our intention was primarily focusing on administrative staff going in there and highlighting opportunities, but it is something that we have made available to the broader community. We haven't advertised it very hard just yet, but I certainly think that there are certain academics who will get in there. And you know, there's a number of them who love to look at data to be able to go pouring through opportunities and to find those rare, rare finds in other countries that they might be able to apply for that weren't on their radar. To have very detailed searches in funding institutional, so they're getting weekly digests of new opportunities and being able to look at, you know, 6 different grant projects of various stages of maturity that they might be able to morph into that particular opportunity. You know, research funding is difficult to come by at the moment, and so everyone is getting more creative about how to find that. So I think a number of academics will be taking that approach.
Okay, thanks.
But it certainly wouldn't be the standard that we're recommending academics do. I think it's sort of an opt-in approach of if academics want to do that, they can.
Yeah. Okay, and as a question for you, Eleonora, so how can I find what funding agencies exist in funding institutions? So what is the coverage?
We have a global coverage, although we cover mainly English-speaking funders, so then it really depends on the country itself. But it's possible to look at the funders in the search, and it's possible to filter by country or by funder type and see easily which funders we are currently covering.
Thanks. And can you lift the curtain for what coming plans are for integration between funding institutional and Pure?
We have, of course, the plan to improve the integration, because as Jeremy said, there are some points which can definitely be improved. We'll, at the moment, actually on information I would like to share, at the moment we are sharing COVID-19 related opportunities from funding institutional to Pure, also for users of Pure who don't have funding institutional. And this free import was supposed to be available until the end of November, but we will definitely make it available until the end of the year at least. In terms of improvements, there are some metadata which will be sent from funding institution into Pure, which are not sent yet, such as the funding type or the eligibility criteria. And in terms of functionality itself, at the moment, you need to manually select in funding institutional the opportunities that you want to send to Pure, while the plan is also to sync automatically the saved searches that you have in funding institution. So a user can define a search, and then these opportunities will be automatically sent to Pure anytime that there is a new opportunity which meet the search criteria. And there are other plans that need to be defined.
Thanks for that. Let's conclude the session with that. Thank you, Eleonora and Jeremy.